Hey, a random stranger. There is a lot to cover before we finally watch the last episode of Hibike Euphonium Season 3, so let's not waste a moment. I want to start with Taki because a lot of what happened in episodes 10 to 12, particularly his decision to have the students vote for who gets the youth solo, and also his decision to not really explain, his decisions, comes back to how he thinks about musical competition. Taki shared with Kumiko how just bloody hard it is to succeed in competitive music, especially if you're aiming to lead a bunch of high schoolers to victory in a nationwide competition that only happens once a year. He compared it to stacking rocks on the river Styx, but his wife's words gave him a different perspective. She said, "They're not rocks, they're people." Penso Sha 3 wrote a great explanation for this. They wrote, "They're not rocks, they're people has me sobbing harder every time." The story is referencing a Buddhist tale about being forced to build up stones until a river knocks them down as a punishment or a purgatory for children who die too early. Taki frames this as school teachers having their progress reset every year, and his wife corrects him by saying that building up young people is a worthwhile thing to do. Yeah, I came to a similar conclusion, but by a very different route. So the translation mentioned the river Styx, which is that mythical boundary between the living realm and the underworld. And the Styx is notoriously chaotic and filled with, this murky, putrid, treacherous substance. So Taki was saying that trying to win a music competition is a thankless, almost impossible task where the ground constantly shifts beneath you and the most unforgiving randomness can just undo your best efforts. I thought that was a pretty good analogy for the competitive music scene. Judges can be subjective, and at the highest levels of performance, the nature of music itself resists objectivity. The auditorium's acoustics can throw off your band's perfectly calibrated sound. Your most reliable player on the day can experience sudden jitters. Anything can happen. And Taki's approach has been to work within all of that uncertainty by trying to engineer his way through it, by finding the perfect configuration of players and sounds that will maximize the chances of producing a win. But what his wife reminded him of is that instead of treating his students as the rocks, the things that he arranges and optimizes, he should ultimately remember that they're not things. They're people choosing to show up every day to that uncertain, unforgiving environment. They're the ones toughing it out, practicing their instruments every day, working out how to play with each other and perfecting their sound. And that process changes them. It makes them, or it should make them, into better, stronger people. It gives them purpose and sets them up for the rest of their lives. That ultimately means more than any trophy. Of course, aiming to win matters, but only insofar as it positively impacts the people involved. I think that shift in perspective partly explains why Taki chose to have Kumiko and Mayu audition for the solo. A decision that was clearly deeply affecting people in the band couldn't just be handed down from above without their having any stake in it. It had to involve them. So Taki wasn't so much shirking his responsibility as director, which is kind of what I thought for a while, to be honest, but rather ensuring the decision belongs to the students. After all, if they're the ones brave enough to stand in the river Styx, to keep persisting in an environment where there are no guarantees, then they also deserve to own the outcome and not just be subjected to it. Taki also conceded, and later Asuka backed this up, that there is no such thing as a certain style of music or styles of playing that are guaranteed to do well in competitions. There are just too many variables. But if you have to choose, the best thing that Taki could do is give the people affected by the choice a voice in making it. Other kinks that we had to work through in the last couple of episodes was the tension that had built up because of this new 3-stage audition system. Reina's position was essentially, Taki and the system are correct, and if people are upset, they need to suck it up and work on their emotional self-regulation. From a classical professional musician standpoint, Reina's position, harsh though it may be, is actually quite normal. In that world, if your teacher or your conductor makes a call, you trust it. You internalize the critique You practice a lot more and then you get good. You don't go around gathering a committee to discuss, how the feedback made you feel or how it's not clear why certain decisions were made. So while I totally think Reina needs to up her empathy skill points, I also get that she's operating from that professional framework that she's grown up in, and that has served her extremely well. Why would she question the kind of system that's molded her into the brilliant musician that she is? Shuichi, on the other hand, saw what Reina couldn't or refused to see, which is that a high school band is not a professional music conservatorium and that other people aren't like her. These kids aren't professionals. They haven't been raised in the musical equivalent of the Colosseum, where harsh feedback and death of the ego are all normalized. When Reina shot back that Shuichi is just a people pleaser of a VP, I thought, look, it was unfair because Shuichi's point was more subtle than just wanting everyone to feel nice inside. He was pointing out, and rightly so, that people's feelings are important, Reina. If most of the band is quietly seething or confused about the auditions and the constant changes, that anxiety won't just go away because Reina tells them to just get over it. It'll fester and if left alone will poison their performance. Unfortunately for Shuichi, caring about other people's feelings is a really hard sell to a girl who thinks you can just overcome hot weather with the power of your mind. Kumiko, meanwhile, was stuck between the two, but as president, she had to make a decision on how best to move forward, which led to my most favorite scene so far in season 3. I'm so glad that they put this in because Kumiko decided to consult the ultimate giver of wisdom, Asuka Tanaka, who is now living with her wife, Kaori, in the most aggressively neat and cutely decorated apartment ever. I loved the detail of there being this stubbornly messy pile of books and notebooks in the otherwise immaculate apartment. I envisioned this whole headcanon where even though Kaori keeps the space pristine and makes Asuka, do her fair share of the chores with a very long-suffering but a very loving sigh, she still allows Asuka her own space, if a very contained one. They've clearly worked out some sort of equilibrium and it's super sweet in the most understated way. It was the most Asuka thing to have prophesized that if Kumiko ever showed her face, it would be because she fought with Reina. And sure, it wasn't the drama Asuka had fanficked out in her crazy imagination about Reina going overseas, thus precipitating this big gay breakup, but it was close enough. Oh, also, after finding out that Kumiko had indeed broken up with Reina, as Asuka had predicted, I loved how Kaori was just well, that's lame. And I think Asuka's meanness has rubbed off a little bit on her and it's so cute. I've really missed Asuka, if you can't tell. There she was eating her Oreo with her head in Kaori's lap, being her usual flippant self, even as Kumiko, filled them in on the Mayu situation. And she was smushing Kumiko's head between the two Oreo cookies when all of a sudden she flipped on the serious switch and sliced through to Kumiko with the insight that although Kumiko's talking a big talk, really she's just being selfish. I think Asuka meant that as an observation, not a judgment. And what she was trying to point out was that, yes, Kumiko genuinely believes the best player should get the solo. That's the principled position. But she also wants Taki to explain himself when she didn't get the part because she's hurt and frustrated about that. That's personal. Those feelings, they're not noble or selfless. And there's also nothing wrong with Kumiko having them. I mean, it'd be weird if she didn't. But Asuka was sharp enough to call out how Kumiko's been framing her own confusion and hurt feelings as a matter of integrity and fairness, when really she just wants to know why she lost, why Taki didn't think she was the better player. Asuka also pointed out Taki's impossible situation. He has to project confidence, not because he is 100% sure or certain of his decision, but because if the students sense that the conductor isn't sure, then every other decision can be questioned and relitigated, and then, you would have anarchy. So Taki acts as if he's certain he made the right choice and doesn't explain it, even when the honest, more complicated answer is that, again, at this level, two players can be so close in ability that the margin of who's better is meaningless for most practical purposes. Just like how, like when you pull apart an Oreo, you can't be sure which side the cream is going to stick on until you've pulled it apart. Hence, like Asuka flipping the Oreo back and forth as she's telling Kumiko this. Taki isn't choosing the objectively superior player. He's more making a bet on a particular sound on a particular day for a particular piece. That insight recontextualizes the simple faith in Taki that people like Reina and Hazuki and Tsubame have expressed. They assume in one way or another that his decisions always come from a place of certainty. And it is true that he has specialized knowledge and experience that is invaluable, but the belief that he must know best or that he must be sure is misplaced, because after a certain point, there is no certainty. There is just the ability to make the most informed bet. And then Asuka said the thing that really lit a fire under Kumiko's butt. She told Kumiko that her true strength is her inability to keep her mouth shut. It's the way that she speaks without regard to consequence, how that unexpected honesty, which coming from anyone else would probably come across as being straight up rude, somehow disarms and lands a punch on people. And it lands because they feel and they know that Kumiko is never strategic about it. When she gives you a piece of her mind, she does it because she believes it with 100% conviction. And that is what makes Kumiko so effective and such a great leader. Golden Sorcerer 01 had some great insights into this season overall, and I wish I could have read the whole comment. But one of their points was on this about Kumiko. They wrote, even if Kumiko is not always right and makes mistakes and her feelings are a mess, her being true to what she wants moves those around her, like she did for Asuka. That's why I think Kumiko's speech in Ep 10 is the best scene in Hibike and truly shows what makes Kumiko special. Not the type of special Reina is, but special in a totally different way. She is special by making those around her special. What I mean is when someone you believe in and love believes in something with their whole heart, you start to accept it too, wanting to acknowledge that person's efforts and conviction. That is why she is the best leader. She made people believe in Taki and the executive's decisions, not by asking him to do it, but by believing in it herself. I loved how that was put, that Kumiko is special in the way she highlights other people's specialness. And we'll get more into why Kumiko is special later, but here, just to wrap up Asuka's point, back in season 2, when Kumiko confronted Asuka about quitting band and called her out for kind of hiding behind her mom's disapproval and pretending that giving up the thing that she loved was some kind of adult decision, Asuka didn't actually agree with anything Kumiko said, and yet the passionate, genuine way Kumiko reached out to her did inspire Asuka to find a way to come back to band. I like to think that Kumiko planted something in Asuka that we got to see the fruits of in season 3 in this scene. You know, the girl who wouldn't let herself want things, who masked her true feelings behind layers and layers of sarcasm and indifference. She made the decision to move out and to move in with her wife and start building a life that's somewhat her own. I mean, we don't see what Asuka's relationship with her mom is like now, so we can't really read too much into it. But either way, it's clear that if someone as closed off as Asuka could be moved by Kumiko, that makes Kumiko a real force to reckon with. Which is why afterwards, Kaori was like, I'm so jealous of you, Kumiko, because you actually got through to her. Also, just the fact that Asuka gave Kumiko the time of day, because she doesn't do that just for anyone. I mean, everyone else can bugger off because it's not her problem, you know? But Kumiko is special. Kumiko matters. After she left the Tanaka Nakaseko residence, Kumiko shot across a bridge in the same dramatic manner that we've seen her do a couple of times now. It's how you know she's made a pivotal decision and something big is going to happen. Hoffatel very neatly tied this running scene to one of the main overarching themes across all seasons of Hibike, which is what does it mean to be special? So they wrote, one of Hibike Euphonium's most iconic scenes that even people who have never watched the show are familiar with is Kumiko's run across Uji Bridge. A moment even more significant to fans because this is when Kumiko decides that she wants to improve, that she wants to be a better musician, that she wants to be special. In season 3, we get a callback to this iconic moment after Kumiko's visit to the Tanaka residence. But notice it is not the same bridge that she runs across. I actually did not notice this the first time round, so that detail was cool to know. A different bridge and a different desire. Here, Kumiko doesn't exclaim that she wants to improve as a musician, but that she will speak her mind in her capacity as club president. Her priorities are beginning to change. Season 3 has gradually shown us that yes, Kumiko can be and is special, but perhaps special in a different way than Reina. It was cool to see how across like the different comments on the last video that we all kind of picked up on the point that Kumiko may not be special in the same way Reina is, but she does most definitely have her own special abilities, her own special aura. And we really see that when she unleashes her badass presidential powers. To begin with, to diffuse the tension, she reached out to Reina and Shuichi first. And I really liked how she led with her own mistakes and her own failures first. She acknowledged what she could have handled better before she proposed anything about what needs to change. And that's just like classic good communication. She also decided to, right before their prefectural competition performance, when everyone was still kind of on edge, to give this huge rallying speech, to speak her mind like very awkwardly but very endearingly. She acknowledged how hard the situation's been on everyone. Again, being such a good communicator, she didn't try to convince anyone that they should feel differently about it. But she did fervently remind them of what they had all committed to, which was winning gold at nationals, that this demanding process has made them better musicians, and that they should take full advantage of that. During this scene, it was, I thought, so cute and so in character that it kind of took Reina a second, maybe 2 seconds, to follow Kumiko's lead and bow in apology too. Because, you know, deep down, she probably still thought that they did nothing wrong and that people really should just grow up. But she also recognized that this was the way to get through to people, that Kumiko knew what she was doing. And she had also promised Kumiko her full support no matter what. That speech completely shifted the dynamic in the band. Not because Kumiko was particularly eloquent. I mean, quite the opposite. In fact, that's probably why it worked so well. Her visible nervousness and just stream of word vomit disarmed everyone, just like it did with Asuka, because it told them that she's for real. It wasn't rhetorical flourish, but exactly what she feels on the deepest level. And that is infectious. Ergo, what makes Kumiko special is this superpower of making people feel seen in their struggles and their anxiety, but also being able to reconnect them to what makes that struggle worth it. And that is a really rare skill. And the fact that they've been building Kumiko up for this moment since the first time we saw her in season 1 is incredible. After they made it past Prefecturals, everyone was pumped. It made them believe that they had a real shot at nationals. And everyone was talking about how great the trumpet youth Soli was, which seemed to have quelled people's doubts over Taki's decision to give the solo to Mayu. For Kumiko, it gave her a lot of mixed emotions. Of course it did. Like, obviously she was happy that they made it through, but disappointed that it wasn't her who had played the Soli with Reina. I wanted to focus on Mayu next because I think these episodes confirmed for me that Mayu isn't just a Kumiko 1.0 and a rehash of her character arc in season 1. I think Mayu turned out to be one of the more psychologically interesting characters. We finally got the story that partially explains her behavior, like how she had a friend who kept telling Mayu it was fine that Mayu kept getting all the solo parts over her until one day it wasn't fine and then they just quit. What Mayu learned from that is that people's stated feelings and their true feelings can be in total conflict, and that by the time that gap becomes obvious, it's often too late, which is why she kept offering the solo to Kumiko. She was terrified of hurting someone who is secretly suffering even while they say they're okay. However, something else is also true about Mayu. Like Kanade had figured out, if Mayu had really wanted to forfeit the part, she'd just do it quietly, like how Kanade had when throwing the audition for Natsuki's sake. None of this repeatedly raising it in front of Kumiko and other people and kind of just letting her offer hang in the air. The fact that Mayu kept offering but never just doing it means that she actually didn't want to forfeit. She wanted someone to tell her to give it up, to take the decision completely out of her own hands. And it's because she cares too much about playing well. She cannot betray her integrity as a musician. Not to mention the fact that if you're a very talented player, it's actually quite difficult to pretend like you're worse than you are without it being really obvious. Kumiko has a related problem, which is being deliberately vague about what she really wants, because wanting things explicitly is scary. You're kind of putting yourself out there. And we saw that with her tussling over whether to go to music school. She spent ages not saying out loud what she wanted, when really she'd already decided way before, but was too afraid to say it out loud. With the situation with Mayu, Kumiko did really want meritocracy, which is like the part that she spoke out loud, but she was also scared of admitting that she was scared of losing the solo to Mayu. So that was the part that she suppressed and didn't really fess up to. Both Mayu and Kumiko are experts at hiding what they truly want inside like a fog of half-spoken truths. Kumiko also said something that I think, again, recontextualized Asuka's earlier call out of her being selfish. She told Mayu that her selfish wish is to honor this meritocratic system that they've spent 3 years building. But this time, unlike all the other times that Kumiko has said, oh, the best player deserves a solo, she framed it not as a noble principle. So she dropped that act, but she honestly admitted that this is truly what she wants. This is what her selfish wish is. In doing so, she half confirmed Asuka's read while also, correcting it. Yes, she was being selfish, but what she's being selfish about is the integrity of the system itself. She wants the result to mean something. She wants, if she wins, to have one fair and square, and if she loses, to have legitimately lost to someone better. That landed for Mayu because it gave her permission to want the solo, to not have to worry about upsetting Kumiko or managing anyone else's feelings, but to just play freely and honestly and to just be real. It's also why Kumiko was able to step up and rally the troops after Reina chose Mayu over her. She thought back to what Taki had said about how the best person for the part is someone who is true in the real sense of the word. And in that moment, she understood what he meant, that the best player isn't the most objectively superior player because that doesn't really exist, not at this level. Instead, it is someone who shows up to the music without any pretense, someone who isn't performing a version of themselves that's calculated to please or holding back out of fear or deference, but just someone who plays honestly with everything that they have. And Mayu, after everything, did just that in the audition. She was fully herself, and that met Taki's standard. Interestingly, it wasn't what Reina had previously said, which is that Mayu is just better at giving Taki the sound that he wants. And so Kumiko couldn't argue with the outcome, even as it broke her, because she'd gotten exactly what she wanted. The most honest version of Mayu had beaten the most honest version of Kumiko on that day. And as much as that hurt, it was the only result that Kumiko could actually respect. Let's tackle the big thing, which is the details of the audition for the solo part between Mayu and Kumiko. And in particular, the possible musical reasoning behind why Reina chose Mayu over Kumiko. It's clear that Taki genuinely could not pick between them. And knowing that he doesn't make those decisions lightly, that carries real weight. There really was not much sunlight between their skill levels. So in my first reaction, I was like, I totally would have picked the second audition, which was Kumiko, because I thought that the sound was warmer, it blended better with the trumpet, and it was less pitchy. However, since then, I've made some very important discoveries on a musical level that made me understand better why things went down the way that they did. Number one, when I rewatched the episodes, I found this critically important screenshot, which is the sheet music for the entire youth solo part along with Kumiko's notes on how she needs to play it. That's what I needed to then go back and compare bar by bar who did what well in their respective auditions, what went wrong, and then draw a conclusion as to whether it made sense why the band and Reina chose the way that they did. And spoiler, it does make sense that the band was split right down the middle, and also why Reina chose Mayu. I really have to give Keone props for even including the sheet music like this for like those 2 seconds, because it shows that they know their fan base really well. They knew that there would be crazy people out there like me who would find it and then analyze it to death and then use it to reconstruct the reasoning behind people's choices. That said, I want to emphasize that although the sheet music went a long way to help me understand on a technical level why Reina picked Mayu, I think the more important reasons the writers had it play out that way were more narrative and emotional. But back to the sheet music first. The first thing I noticed is that it has the phrase non-vib written all over it. That stands for non-vibrato. Vibrato is the vibrating of the sound to add warmth or richness to the sound. Non-vibrato obviously is the opposite of that. And that immediately made me rethink my take on the auditions, because it turns out I came at it from a strings player perspective, not a brass player, and that was a mistake. Context is, so in strings, vibrato has been the default since like the late 18th century, and particularly after the Romantic period of classical music. It became so baked into strings technique that to not play with continuous vibrato sounds wrong now and like too austere. You do have certain string orchestras who specifically do not use vibrato or use it minimally, particularly the ones who are trying to recreate authentic pre-romantic works like Bach's or Mozart's music, but that has not been the norm for quite some time. With string instruments, you use vibrato consistently across all registers and all dynamics unless otherwise told. The development of brass, on the other hand, is different. According to my research, and I'd love to hear, again, brass players' input on this, unlike in strings, vibrato in brass is something you add selectively and sparingly for certain moments of expressiveness and not something you maintain as a baseline sound. In fact, too much vibrato can mess with the pitch of a brass instrument. So clean, controlled, natural tone with barely any vibrato is more highly valued in brass than in strings. The reason why all of that is important is because seeing non-vib, non-vib, non-vib all over the sheet music, which you rarely ever see in strings music, tells me, okay, they wanted a sound that was a more natural, clear euphonium tone. So when I first heard Mayu's audition and thought, oh, it sounded less expressive, less warm, I was unconsciously penalizing Mayu for doing exactly what the score had asked. And then when audition 2 sounded warmer and I guess more beautiful to me, what I was responding to was Kumiko applying a kind of expressiveness that I, as a strings player, demand, because it's weird for me to think in non-vibrato terms because I wasn't born in the 17th century. But for this context and on paper, Kumiko was giving something that the sheet music wasn't really asking for. That's not saying that there was a huge difference between Mayu and Kumiko. In fact, it was a very subtle difference in the vibrato or the warmth of their tone, but it was still a difference. And in the context of what was required, probably an important one. I could also go like bar by bar what set the two auditions apart. And the TLDR is that there were things about both auditions that were done excellently as well as mistakes on both parts. For instance, in Mayu's audition, she came in slightly late on the last beat of bar 8, as well as on the second 8th note of beat 3 in bar 11. Also in bar 11, she had intonation issues on the downward slide, which Kumiko actually circled in blue on her sheet music. So you know that that was like a difficult one. If you re-listen to Kumiko's audition, in bar 3, she swells the dynamics more than Mayu when it's supposed to be piano, meaning softer. She also made some fairly significant rhythmic mistakes, like in bar 9 when she held that first dotted 8th note for too long. And then in bar 12, She made another mistake where she came in late on the second half of beat 3. And then in bar 13, she didn't connect that dotted crotchet to the 8th note, whereas Mayu did. I could go on, like you could dig into the nitty gritty like that and try to figure out who the better player was. But honestly, even if you judged based on the sheet music in that level of detail, choosing either Kumiko or Mayu would be defensible. Most of those differences that I just mentioned, like the slight intonation wobbles, the rhythmic slip-ups, even the overall tone, they're all quite fixable things with just a bit more practice. And for the show to have successfully conveyed that is genuinely impressive. They managed to make this audition very distinct from the Reina versus Cowdy audition in season 1. Reina there was, demonstrably superior. Taki knew it, the students knew it, everyone knew it, and there was only resistance because of loyalty to Cowdy. The lesson of that ordeal was having the best band with the best players sometimes requires us to set aside our sentimentality. The lesson of this face-off between Kumiko and Mayu was different. Here, the lesson was sometimes it's not clear who the best player is. Sometimes it can be between two different conceptions of what the best means in a specific musical context. And sometimes, even when you make a choice based on the information that you have, you could just have easily gone the other way and no one could say that you were wrong. This comment from Yubi summarizes my own feelings like the first time I watched the auditions. They wrote, "This is my second time watching episode 12 now, and I'm absolutely with you on preferring the second Youth. The warm tone just blends so well with the trumpet, but I think Reina is just ruthless and couldn't overlook the mistakes in her mind and made her decision based upon that. Personally, I think she made the wrong call because you can clean up the mistake, but the synergy of Kumiko's youth and her trumpet is inherently stronger. But there's a lot about Reina's values I find confusing at the best of times, but it's what makes her what she is, and it's what Kumiko loves about her, so I gotta accept it. It's actually also why I love and relate to Reina so much, because she really is such a stickler for professional classical musician principles. It is so devastating that she always knew she was voting against Kumiko. It's so cruel, but it's so good. Their scene at the end of the episode still absolutely kills me. That last point that Yubi made really is the crux of the scene and why I think it was so powerful that the writers chose for Reina to choose Mayu, because it cost her terribly. She knew who she was choosing, and I'd also say the other third years would have known too, or at the very least, Midori, Hazuki, and Kanade knew. There were things that could have reasonably tipped Reina towards Mayu. For example, if the piece is meant to evoke the coming of winter while a pleasant light still lingers, which is something that she and Kumiko discussed in a previous episode, then Mayu's cooler, more receding euphonium sound is preferable because it contrasts against and elevates the trumpet's warmer tone. And that tension between the cold and the warmth is closer to what the piece is trying to say than two warm-sounding instruments blending nicely together. There's also just the reality that Reina had to make a snap decision. And when you're under that kind of time pressure and just general crushing pressure, there are certain mistakes that will stick out more in the split moment that you have to choose, like the sizable rhythmic mistakes that Kumiko made, for example. Unlike us, who can rewind and play it as many times as we want, she had to make a choice right then and there. Given any other day, she may well have gone the other way. They played a flashback just before Reina announced her decision, the moment where Reina made Kumiko a promise never to abandon her or betray her or else, face death. Voting against Kumiko, in one sense, it felt like a betrayal, to Reina at least. Reina, more than anyone, knew what this solely meant to them both, and yet she still killed their chance of playing it together in their final year because she honestly believed that Mayu played better that day. You really have to respect the courage it took for Reina to act on that conviction. In fact, Reina voting any other way would have been the real betrayal. And again, I want to go back to Golden Sorcerer's comment because they explained it well. They wrote, "The promise that both of them made that the better player should play is what they valued the most. So while Reina really, really wanted to choose Kumiko, she was able to remain true to herself and her friend by choosing Mayu. I think that is the harshest position the show has put Reina through. And through that, we see the growth that Kumiko had reached. She wants to be a true person. That is her way of being special. Not like Reina, who is like a moon shining in a dark night, but like a sun, which gives light and warmth to all. Now, right, it would have been more of a betrayal to choose Kumiko because she wanted to and not because she really thought she was the best. And what's more, Kumiko would totally have known. I found it interesting that Kumiko's own words presented another narrative reason for why she may have lost out to Mayu, and it was wrapped up in her overall uncertainty about her future direction. Remember that advice that she gave to Motomi about how your true emotions show up in your playing? That was actually foreshadowing what happened in Kumiko's own audition. Someone who hasn't fully committed to what she wants, who has still a hint of hesitation, who's still kind of hedging her own future, is going to sound different from someone who has committed. And that ambivalence has a way of showing up in the music, whether you intend it to or not. As for the rest of the band, the votes split an even 50-50, reflecting again that there's not much separating Kumiko and Mayu. I was particularly interested in how Kanade voted, because did you notice that she took a beat before she raised her hand? So you have to wonder if she'd also heard Kumiko's mistakes and, was also thinking about everything that we've already talked about. Maybe she knew who the strictly technical better player in that audition was, which was Mayu, but she also knew what this solo meant for Kumiko and had sworn fealty to her. So in the end, maybe she was like, they're close enough that I can back my Oshi without completely betraying the meritocratic principle, even though, I did hear those mistakes, but whatever, I'm just going to stick with Kumiko. Other things I thought this scene did so well, I loved how they focused on feet throughout these excruciating moments. It made everything so much more tense. Like when they stood next to each other and everyone was waiting with bated breath for the reveal of who player one was, it was just feet. And then when Kumiko stepped forward to rally the troops again, the way that they animated her marching forward was so strong. Like, this is the most conviction Kumiko has ever had in the series. You also have to really respect how stoic all three of them, like Reina, Mayu, and Kumiko, were right after Reina had announced her decision. They really kept it together, not wanting to add fuel to the emotional fire despite how devastating the outcome was for all of them. And yes, devastating even for Mayu, because she knew that despite her winning the audition fairly, at least half the band voted against her. However, I also liked that we got this brief shot of Mayu smiling afterwards. It was just a small moment that she took for herself. Like, after all the stress of dealing with and worrying about people who were pulling for Kumiko to win, she had managed to win over half the band and also Reina, purely based on her playing, and I think she deserved that moment. When Kumiko yelled out that this result is the best for Catalgy, she really woke everyone up from the stupor of shock and disappointment and, pity. I so appreciated how she emphasized that everyone owned this choice, including herself, which, implicitly relieved Reina of the racking guilt that she must have been feeling for being the deciding vote, but really it was everyone's choices and actions and votes that had led them to this point. As she was doing her power speech, I also enjoyed seeing the looks on Midori and Hazuki's faces, relief that their best friend is okay, and also well, there she is, there's Kumiko doing her special president thing, and it's awesome. With that speech, Kumiko broke the tension in the room and brought it again back to what it was all about, winning gold at nationals as one unified unit. I think that's also when she completely won over Mayu too. I think when Kumiko saw Mayu, of all people, break down like that, it would have confirmed that she'd done the right thing. This is a girl who has never really shown any true emotion on her face because she's just so concerned with getting along with everyone else. But even she couldn't keep up her walls with Kumiko. In short, Kumiko is just brilliant. Before we get to the final mountain scene between Kumiko and Reina and kind of do a whole overview of the Kumirei relationship throughout all of these ups and downs, we need to appreciate this moment between Kumiko and Kanade, who was furious about the audition outcome. You know, she was just so mad at the universe and she had to let it out on Kumiko. She was like, why do you so easily accept when things don't go your way? Why do you always have to be the one who takes the short end of the stick? It was really about her disappointment on behalf of Kumiko, whom she loves so much and looks up to so much. And also the disappointment of not getting to play with Kumiko in her final year. I'm glad Kanade had this moment, even though it was just so painful, because so far she's tried to be strong for Kumiko and she really needed to have a moment where she could just let out her own frustrations. This line Kanada said was like quite astute, you know, about how, yes, she believes meritocracy is the best system, but that is a separate issue from how she feels about the outcome. She was able to articulate something that Kumiko at this point hadn't said for herself, that, you know, it's just not fair. You know, not in the sense that the result was wrong, but in the deeper, more human sense that it hurts all the same. The outcome being meritocratically defensible does not make it any less heartbreaking. Both those things are true at once. You can believe in the system and still grieve over what the system produced. Watching Kumiko comfort Kanade actually made the last scene that Kumiko had with Reina that much more gut-punching for me, because it showed that she really was just kind of holding it together for Kanade and didn't want to let her see how broken up she was inside. That was reserved for when she was alone with Reina, the one other person who shoulders the burden of leading the band towards victory and who is the only person who truly understands her. I mean, there's also Shuichi, but we know who Kumiko's real equal is. It was fitting that we ended this climactic stretch of episodes up on the mountain, you know, the ultimate symbol of Kumiko and Reina's relationship and how it's developed over time. Because of how central Kumirei has been to the entire series, I wanted to go back and run through some of the events of these last few episodes again, but through the lens of what it meant for their relationship. After the disagreement over what to do about the unrest in the band, Reina did apologize to Kumiko for calling her a failure of a president, an apology that I'm very glad happened because it showed that Reina understands that even though they're close enough now to trade blunt truths with each other, that one definitely crossed the line, not in the least because she knew that it wasn't true. I also loved how Kumiko signaled her forgiveness by doing a great impression of Asuka, like very over the top, which was appropriate given that it was Asuka's words that pushed her to just be herself, and in doing so proved Reina wrong, that there was a better way to help lift the band out of the quagmire that it was stuck in. We also got a proper Kumirei hug, and I just loved how it was Kumiko who closed the distance between them and grabbed Reina first, and Reina initially had no idea where to like put her hands. She's just very awkward. Physical touch is definitely not her love language, but you know, she got the hang of it in the end. And then it was just so nice how they like rested against each other, just finally at peace because they're back on the same page and everything is right in the world. In that scene, Kumiko also made this heartfelt acknowledgement to Reina, which was, I'm where I am now because you're so selfish. So another instance where calling someone selfish was more said in appreciation than judgment. Reina's selfishness, so her absolute refusal to compromise her standards or to pretend that she doesn't want what she really wants, is what pulled Kumiko forward in life. For the longest time, Kumiko was really vague about her desires and hid behind a fog of ambiguity. When she was like, I don't know what I want for myself or for my future, I'm not really sure, we know now it was really her fear of wanting something and then not getting it. She was protecting herself from any and all disappointment by lowering her expectations. But from Reina's example, like from her uncompromising, explicitly expressed desire to be special, that really pulled Kumiko out of that funk and gave her the courage to really go for what she wants. One really important moment that we haven't talked about yet was when they both went to watch Mizore's music college performance. For Reina, watching Mizore confirmed that this is the path for her, whereas for Kumiko, it clarified for her and also Mizore didn't really hold back in saying it, that becoming a pro musician wasn't how she was going to shine. Not really. And that wasn't a verdict of failure. It was just a recognition that her path and her, I guess, flavor of special is, again, different to Reina's. Hearing Mizore say that this wasn't her place was the push that Kumiko needed to commit to what she'd already decided, which was to choose something else. So on the way home from the performance, we saw visually and I think symbolically what that decision meant for the Kumirei relationship. Kumiko comes up from behind Reina, she catches up to her, gives her a little push, and then actually overtakes her on the road. And I read that as kind of like a silent sign that even if Kumiko isn't following Reina to music school, there are other areas in which she can excel and match that same passion that she found through and with Reina. Reina's calling is to become a pro musician. Kumiko has her own calling. There was another possible layer to this road crossing scene that Yui Hirasara from HTT pointed out. So they wrote, I think Reina is thinking about how little time they have left together. And so she was trying to slow down and enjoy all the time that they have left, because she is so worried about them splitting up. It could also just be Reina stalling since she is about to break up with Kumiko. I love that contrast between Reina dragging her feet because she thinks that, this is it for them. This is where they part ways. Whereas Kumiko had actually just figured out that it is okay for them to be headed towards different destinations, because their relationship was never about discovering the passion to become professional musicians together. Reina really had to disentangle herself from that idea. She thought that not having the same exact life outcome meant that they would lose everything else that they'd found in each other. Hence the hilarious preemptive breakup scene where Kumiko was like, wait, Bish, what do you want about? Instead, although music was the context in which they came to know and became close to each other, their relationship has really all along been about discovering their shared capability to passionately pursue whatever it is that they put their minds to. So just like she's had to before, Kumiko reassured Reina that they'd be just fine. Part of me is like, I don't know. I've had friends move overseas before and you don't tend to remain close to them, or at the very least, it's never what it used to be, but maybe that's just me. The stronger part of me, of course, is like Kumirei will always be together forever. And sure enough, Kumiko states it more plainly by saying to Reina, you're special after all, you're my special person, meaning that their bond is not dependent on whether they're in the same band or going to the same school, doing the same things, or even in the same country. Their bond exists independently of all that. As long as Reina remains Reina and Kumiko remains Kumiko, their relationship won't change. To me, that was basically Kumiko saying her marriage vows. I vow to be with you in sickness and in health, in Japan or America, in music school or not. Even the way that she was holding Reina's hands was very, to me, like life commitment style. And I just love how healthy their relationship has become, because it is a relationship that pushes each of them individually to become better in every way. Better people, better at going after what they really want in life, better at saying the hard things that need to be said, just better at everything that really matters. And then the Mayu versus Kumiko audition took place. Reina made her devastating choice, and we end up on the mountain again, one last time. The mountain has been the site of these momentous milestones in the Kumirei relationship. Season 1, the night of the summer festival, the mountain was where they first acknowledged each other, I guess, and Reina moved Kumiko by expressing her desire to be special. In season 2, it was where Reina raged at herself for not knowing about Taki's wife. And now in season 3, here they are grieving together and reflecting on what has been the hardest year of both their lives. Watching Reina be so crushed about her vote was painful. This whole last scene just tore our hearts out. At first, Kumiko tried to tell Reina that it's okay, that it wasn't her fault, and that she knew she hadn't given everything she had to the audition. And she related that to herself realizing that music school wasn't for her. Not for lack of talent, but because that's just not her path. Being able to recognize that is an actual accomplishment for Kumiko, because it shows that she's learned over the years to value honest acknowledgement over comfortable fiction and ambiguity. That it is better to say what you really want or don't want than to hide it out of fear of the consequences. And then came the ultimate role reversion, which I'm sure everyone noticed. Kumiko touched Reina's lips and reiterated that she's special, which was a direct parallel to season 1 when it was Reina who touched Kumiko's lips while declaring that she doesn't want to be the same as anyone else. She wants to be special. Part of Reina's specialness has been a stubborn selectiveness with regards to who she chooses to get close to. And that tracks, someone who wants to be and is exceptional and extraordinary tends to form deep bonds with other people who they consider exceptional and extraordinary. Which leads to the question, in season 3, it's clear that she's the closest to Kumiko that she's ever been, despite Kumiko ultimately not winning the Soli part, nor even wanting to go to music school. So what is it that Reina sees in Kumiko that keeps her bound to her? And the answer is that Kumiko is special in that, just like Reina, she refuses to follow the paths of other people. People Reina once condescendingly called those perfect people. The ones, I guess, who make choices because other people or society tells them to, or because it's a safer option, even if it's not what they truly want. And we've seen over time that the truest expression of Kumiko has been to push against that. I mean, the two of them sneaking up the mountain is proof that they're special, right? I just love how simple Reina's initial definition of being special was, like way back in season 1. Like, no one would be crazy enough to hike up a mountain on festival day, right? Like, we're so cool that we're doing this. The thing is, Kumiko did hike up with Reina, because she's just as crazy and just as special. She gets Reina on that level. Their connection, even from the start, ultimately wasn't about being the best musicians, but about not doing what everyone else is doing and doing what's right for them regardless of what anyone else says. That's what that intimate lip touch represents. It's their promise to be different. And honestly, I think Kumiko has more than proved that in her final year as president. She made decisions no other president before her did and rallied the band in ways no one else could, including Reina. So now when instead of Reina, it was Kumiko doing the lip touch, that's her reminding Reina that they've kept their promise to be special together, even in the most trying circumstances. Reina is special because unlike what most other people would have chosen, she chose the best player even though it killed her to do it. And Kumiko is special because she understood why Reina made that choice, and she took that outcome and used it to sharpen the band's resolve to throw everything they have at nationals. This was like the heart-wrenching bit. Reina choosing the way she did is why Kumiko loves her and 100% supports it, but she also allowed herself to sit with and reckon with the very human part of herself that was just dying inside. Of course, part of her was devastated that she hadn't been good enough on the day to best Mayu and have her last Soli hurrah with Reina. It is not humanly possible to want something so much and work so hard towards it, only to fall short right at the last hurdle and not just be absolutely crushed. Kumiko's fear of disappointing Reina also had to be super strong. The first time on the mountain, Reina had made a point about not just thinking she's special, but truly becoming special. So when Kumiko lost to Mayu, maybe something in the back of her mind thought, did I just think I was special? And losing the solo proved that I really wasn't. Even though, of course, we've already discussed how Kumiko is special, just in a different way. Yeah, this scene hurt bad. And the crying scream that Kumiko let out was like, ugh. But it was also good that she was able to have a good, proper cry at last, because she's been holding in all of it since the audition results. And this is the one place she doesn't have to be the strong leader who keeps the band together. She just got to be devastated and to be held by Reina. I also liked that it was a callback to previously when Reina yelled out on the mountain in season 2, frustrated that Kumiko knew about Taki's wife and didn't tell her. That was a moment when another of Reina's dreams was crushed, like finding out she didn't even know that incredibly important detail about her future husband, and also ashamed at her bad response to it. But it was also exactly her disappointment in herself that led Reina to redouble her focus on winning nationals, which is also what happened in season 3. Kumiko's disappointment strengthened her resolve to lead the band to win a true gold. In another role inversion, in season 2, it was Kumiko apologizing to Reina. Ironically apologizing for choosing not to tell Reina about Taki's wife because she didn't want to hurt her. Whereas in season 3, it was Reina apologizing to Kumiko because she did make a choice that she knew would hurt Kumiko. I feel like these two are just like mirror images of each other. Finally, I loved that we ended the scene with their hands interlocked with each other. To me, it represents two people who recognize that what they have with each other is real. It's so real that their bond doesn't require proximity or ending up in the same place to survive. It just requires that they keep choosing to encourage and to keep loving each other. It's the show's answer to every question that it's been asking for 3 seasons, ever since Reina first dragged Kumiko up to that mountain. What does it mean to be special? Is it getting the solo part? Is it winning gold at nationals? For most of the show, they've not won gold, and Kumiko even lost the solo part. The external circumstances kept shifting, like the results, the auditions, their diverging paths, and yet their hands are still interlocked at the end of it all. That, the show is saying, or at least what I think it's saying, is what special looks like. Special is having someone who chooses you through it all, who understands you, and who's still standing right there with you on the other side of it all. Okay, guys, this is it. This is the very last episode of Hibike season 3 in 3, 2, 1, play. Classic cherry blossom imagery. Reina and Kumiko. Ah, their hands. God, they're so cute together. I think they'll be all right. I think they're going to marry and have lots of Kumirei babies. She going to let her in? Yeah. Aw. Play together. There we go. The awkwardness. Oh my god. Oh my god. Kanade's like, I have been waiting for this moment forever. I'm not letting Mayu take it. This is like Asuka's legacy just being passed down. Mm. Man, I love how much Asuka made an impression on Kumiko and vice versa, like what we talked about. And they're going up the mountain. Hey, there's a contrail. It's for Mayu. Oh, God. Kumiko's like, yeah, sure. I'll be waiting at home for you. Oh my God. Is that Chucky's wife's grave? Man, I love this from Mayu. She's found her people and she's okay with it. It really feels like she's let her mask down. Who is that? That's Cowdy and oh, it's Haruka. I was like, huh? Oh, she looks so good. Oh man. I mean, Natsuki and Yuka also have to be here as well. Oh man. Oh man, I'm so emotional for Motomo because you could kind of see him imagine hearing that from his sister, like if she was still around. What are you saying, Kimiko? You're the one who demanded a hug from Reina. Yes. Oh my god. I don't care if they don't win anymore. I think that did it for me. Ooh. Like the character run sheet. She's like, win this or else. Oh, Takakawa. For all those who came before. Oh god. The last one. God damn it, we better get a full performance of at least one song. Oh, the finger up. God, these two. Oh. Oh my god. I love Oboe. Aw. Just doing some manifesting. Oh god, they're gonna intersperse it with like flashbacks to previous seasons. I was kind of hoping Asuka's gonna be there, but I guess not. It's okay, we already saw her. I still remember the symbol girl. That moment. I love how they're matching the sentimentality or like the emotion behind the music to the flashbacks. That's the symbol girl, right? Or what? I don't know. Oh, I forgot her name, but yeah, the girl who got injured. Okay, here we go. Just listen out for that one bum note in the audition. Ah, perfect. That was perfect. She's fixed things. Oh my god. They matched the scene so well to the music. We did it. Oh, we got through it. Oh, that is that the moment that they told her that she's going to be president? So they're taking us through all of the seasons. Yeah, actually, it was really smooth how they led us into winter. Ah! Oh, so good. The classic when they draw all of the music because you know that they know this by heart at this point. Reina just soaring above there. God, exquisite. Reina's happy. I don't think they could have done any better. No regrets. That's it. Is that a youth playing? She's just frozen. Just too much, too much. I loved how everything blanked out except for them two. Mayu did so well. Oh. First signs of emotion that Taki showed, really. And of course, it was this moment. Ah, what a way to like bring it round right to the first episode of season 1. And she was like, I'm so upset, I'm gonna die. Da, 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 da. Oh, we have to let the full credits run. Fangirls there. Oh, Reina. I can't believe you go and ask you were late. Oh, Kanade and Mayu look like BFFs right now. Aww. I love photo montages, like, at the end of shows. I guess, I don't know, Kanade for president next year? Wait, is that Reina with her hair down? Yeah. Yes. Ooh, do we get, like, a little snapshots of, like, their life after graduation? We've heard this song before. It's a different dynamic though, isn't it? Having to defend your gold title. A few years. Of course. I was like, did Kumiko choose teaching? Oh my god, Kumiko did become Taki. This is so perfect for her. Okay, what that was an exact clone of Reina. And there's little Kumiko. Oh, imagine having Kumiko as your like conductor. That's so awesome. Oh man. Okay, here we go with some thoughts on this finale. First, I want to celebrate and pay tribute to how Taki sensei kept his promise to his wife. So, throughout the series, we only really saw brief glimpses of how the tragedy of losing his wife completely changed his life and his outlook on life. But it is such an important invisible driver for how Taki changed and molded the band from season 1 to now. So to see him finally get his hands on that gold win was really gratifying. Secondly, immediately after they announced Kataoji had won, Kumiko was like stunned, as she should be. And as she reminisced back on everything that they'd gone through in the last 3 years, all of the ups and the downs, it gave me such a strong sense that it was all of the experiences and the challenges that she had gone through with her friends that were the most valuable things that she and we have gotten out of this whole process. Not the results, not the win. It's that cliche of it's the journey, not the destination, but without the feeling that it was cliche. Just a well earned conclusion to the band's efforts and on a more meta level to the efforts of the writers and the animators who managed to pull off such a richly emotional series. Kumiko becoming band advisor at Kataoji was perfect, and a lot of us probably saw that coming from a mile away because what is Kumiko good at? It's reminding people of why they're suffering, all of the long hours of practice, the strings of failures, just the pain, why all of that matters, why it's all worth it. And you really need that in a music teacher or an instructor, someone who can just paint glorious pictures of the light at the end of the tunnel when all you can see in front of you is suffocating darkness. Also, remember that it was Kumiko who suggested that they have blind auditions for the solo part. And the fact that Taki hadn't even thought of it spoke volumes. He is definitely a very talented music conductor, but he's had to learn to grasp like people issues better, as he has hinted at when he's talked about how his wife helped reshape his approach to teaching. So yes, he was lucky to have a student president like Kumiko handle all of the tension that this season threw up. And it makes sense that her final evolution was to become the next Taki, and maybe even a better Taki. Overall, I feel like throughout the last couple of videos, between the discussions and all of the great comments that you guys left, we have already covered a lot of the important takeaways and the key themes and whatnot of season 3. So I only really have a few more thoughts to add. Something else I really liked about this season was how they set up different personal stakes than compared to other seasons. At first, especially with the Mayu storyline, I thought that we were just rehashing the Kumiko arc where, she's scared to set out to do her best because it'll hurt other people and make them hate her for taking a competition spot. But it actually turned out to be quite different. Mayu turned out to be different to Kumiko in important ways. We also got a lot less musical performances this season, which, again, at first I kind of missed because that's what Hibike's given us in the past. For us musos, it lets us pick apart technical things and then relate them to personal and plot developments, and that's been really satisfying. However, as season 3 progressed, I did appreciate that shift in focus to personal relationships and band psychology and like Kumiko's struggles as a president became fascinating from a storytelling standpoint. In a way, with the relative lack of seeing auditions and other performances, but more hearing about them from different characters' perspectives, the show put us, the viewers, in the same uncertain, confused position as the students in the band. Usually when watching a competition arc, you sort of know who's going to win and why. The narrative makes it really obvious. The protagonist works really hard, has several emotional breakthroughs, and then earns the win. Hibike season 3 did not do that, like it refused to. Instead, it made you genuinely uncertain as to who the best player is, and it throws a bunch of moving factors at you that increases the level of uncertainty. And then it asks you, given all of the uncertainty, how do you make the right choice? And in some ways, that is more intriguing than, the typical straightforward music competition arc, and I guess also more true to real life. If I had any critique, it would probably be that I still feel like we spent too much time on the Mayu problem. So in this last episode, we saw Kumiko finally breaking that awkward barrier between them and Mayu finally feeling at home with his group of friends. And I loved seeing that. The payoff was real. However, I would have loved to spend more time on other characters, especially Kanade and like the other potentially interesting characters. And I say potentially because we really didn't get enough time with them to even see if they'd be interesting or not. Even existing characters barely got any screen time this season, like Hazuki and Midori and Shuichi, or like the other third years. I would have loved to see their interactions with the younger band members. We did get one episode focusing on Motomu, but afterwards we didn't get much in terms of how his relationship with Midori mirrored that of his sisters, which was a shame because I think exploring that grief and his search for a model for how his sister would have loved and enjoyed music if she had lived could have been such rich material and different to anything we've seen in previous seasons. As I said before, the other person that I wish we could have had way more screen time with is Kanade. Like the little snippets we got of her interacting with Kumiko were some of my favorite moments from this season. It showed how she complements Kumiko in a lot of ways with her sharp observations and her willingness to just say things as she sees them, whether or not she's right. Also the protectiveness that she develops for Kumiko and vice versa, like that would have been really cute to see more of. Honestly, I think I just missed exploring the senpai-kohai dynamic that we got a lot more of in seasons 1 and 2. I mean, even with Shuichi and Motomu or Hazuki and the other first years that we were introduced to at the start of the season and then never really heard from again. Having said all of that, I think the reputation of Hibike being one of the gold standard animes is well deserved, especially from a music standpoint. As a musician, I have been blown away by the accuracy of not just how they portrayed the technical aspects of playing music and how all the practice and rehearsals and instrument techniques work. That's already really impressive. But more than that was how they managed to reflect with eerie insight the emotional ups and downs of mastering your instrument and the friendships and the relationships that you make and break along the way. The respect with which Hibike was able to show regarding the process of learning and playing classical music, I don't know if I'll ever see again in another anime to that rich and that deep of an extent. Maybe you guys have recommendations as to other music-centered anime. I mean, I can talk about it now because we've finished Hibike, but the next anime we'll be watching on this channel together is Girls Band Cry. So a very different anime, obviously, but also similar in the sense of like similar themes of struggle and compromise and commitment in a music context. Yeah, I guess that's it, guys. I cannot express how much I appreciate you all watching Hibike with me from seasons 1 to 2 and now 3. It has taken us years and we've had lots of fun discussions and just a lot of good back and forth that has really enriched my understanding and my appreciation for the series. So thank you so much for all of that. I do hope that you join us for any future anime that we watch here on this channel, but if not, all the best. Keep being yourself in this crazy, crazy world, and as Reina and now Kumiko would say, be special and take care.